The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy. Outside, protesters lined the streets, their chants echoing into the hallways. Inside, all eyes were on Jasmine Crockett, as she stood at the defendant's table, unwavering. A sense of anticipation hung thick in the air. This wasn't just another case. This was a battle of wills, a test of power, and Jasmine was about to prove that she wouldn't be silenced. Judge Gregory Stevens, known for his stern demeanor, had already made it clear that he had little patience for anything that disrupted his courtroom. Jasmine had been pushing the boundaries of decorum all morning, challenging his authority with every turn. It was a battle of egos, and neither was backing down. But what happened next was something no one could have predicted. The judge slammed his gavel onto the bench, his voice cutting through the tension. "Ms. Crockett, your behavior today has been nothing short of disruptive. As a result, you are hereby fined $15,000. I suggest you take this penalty seriously." Gasps filled the courtroom. The fine was hefty, a clear message that the judge intended to silence Jasmine's bold approach. Everyone turned their eyes toward her, waiting to see how she would react. The courtroom was on edge, knowing that Jasmine had a reputation for pushing boundaries. But this was different. A fine this large. Was she going to accept it? Or would she challenge the authority of the judge who seemed determined to break her? Was this the end of her defiance? Would she crumble under the weight of a punishment designed to put her in her place? Jasmine took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She glanced at the judge, then at the audience, her eyes calm but filled with resolve. She could feel the gaze of the courtroom on her. The judge expected her to back down, to accept his punishment and comply. But there was something more at stake here. Something far greater than the fine. Something much more important. And then, with the calmest of expressions, Jasmine stood up. Her voice rang out across the room as she addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I'm not going to accept this fine. You've made a grave mistake. You think this will silence me, but it's only going to make my message stronger." The judge raised an eyebrow, taken aback by her boldness. "Excuse me? Are you refusing to comply with the court's ruling?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "You heard me. I'm not paying a single dime. What you're doing is an abuse of power, and I won't stand for it." Her voice held steady, each word dripping with conviction. The room was stunned into silence. The tension in the air had shifted. It was no longer about the fine. It was about the standoff between the two powerful figures. Was Jasmine really going to challenge the system in such an audacious way? Or was this all an act? Could she really defy a judge and get away with it? In that moment, the question lingered in the minds of everyone present. What would happen now? Judge Gregory Stevens wasn't one to take defiance lightly. His gavel struck the bench once more, this time with a force that rattled the air. "You are in contempt of court, Ms. Crockett." His voice thundered across the courtroom, his authority unmistakable. "You will pay the fine, or I will have no choice but to hold you in contempt and increase your punishment." But Jasmine stood firm, her eyes never leaving the judge's, unwavering. In a world where so many people would back down at the first sign of authority, Jasmine wasn't afraid to stand her ground. Her reputation had been built on challenging the status quo, speaking truth to power. And now she was going to show everyone that no one could push her around, not even a judge. With all the power in the courtroom. "Contempt?" Jasmine repeated, her voice low but strong. "You can call it whatever you want, but this is about standing up for what's right. You think you can just throw down a fine and make me disappear? You're wrong." The judge's face reddened with anger. "You'll regret this, Ms. Crockett. The law is the law, and you will respect it." He motioned to the bailiff, signaling that he was ready to escalate the situation. Jasmine wasn't backing down. She knew the risks. She knew the consequences. But she had faced far worse in her career than a courtroom standoff with an angry judge. Her eyes swept over the crowd, the cameras capturing every moment. This was her moment. There was no turning back now. Respect the law? Jasmine scoffed, her voice rising. The law is supposed to serve the people, not crush them under its weight. And when it's used to silence voices like mine, it's time to make a stand. The courtroom was thick with tension, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Could she really get away with this? The eyes of the public were now on her, as well as the millions watching the broadcast live. The judge's face was grim, but the audience was caught in the storm of emotions, a mix of disbelief, awe, and growing anticipation. "Ms. Crockett, you are not above the law," the judge snapped, visibly shaken but still trying to maintain control. "You will pay the fine, or you will face further consequences." Jasmine, however, was prepared. With a calmness that belied the storm brewing inside, she turned to the gallery of onlookers. "I'm not here to be intimidated. I'm here to stand up for the people who have no voice, those who are crushed under the weight of a broken system. If I have to pay for that with my own freedom, so be it." The judge's hand hovered over his gavel, a warning shot fired with every motion. The bailiff stepped forward, but Jasmine was already a step ahead. She pulled out her phone and, in a swift motion, began to live stream the entire exchange. Her face was calm, but her words cut through the tension like a blade. "You think I'll be silenced? No, Judge Stevens, this isn't over, not by a long shot." The courtroom fell into a new kind of silence, one that was not about fear or intimidation, but about something deeper, a shared understanding that this moment was something historic. The stakes were higher now, and it was clear that Jasmine's refusal to back down was more than just an act of defiance. It was a message, a declaration of resistance against a system that too often pushed ordinary people aside. As she continued her live stream, the comments section exploded. The world was watching, and they were taking sides. The internet was ablaze with debate, some supporting Jasmine's stand, others claiming she had crossed the line. But what no one could deny was that Jasmine Crockett was now a symbol, a figure who had transcended the courtroom, becoming a voice for those who had long been silenced by authority. Judge Stevens, realizing that his efforts to intimidate her had only fueled the fire, clenched his jaw. He had underestimated her, and now the real battle had just begun. The courtroom was no longer just a place of legal proceedings. It had become a battleground. Jasmine's decision to live-stream the exchange had set the internet on fire. In real time, her followers exploded with support, flooding the comments with messages of admiration. The hashtag #YourStandWithJasmine was trending, and soon her defiance was the talk of news outlets across the nation. Back in the courtroom, the judge's face had turned an unsettling shade of crimson. It was clear that the power he once wielded with ease was slipping from his grasp. The media had already picked up on the growing conflict, and now they were calling it something much bigger than a courtroom disagreement. It was a clash of ideologies, a fight between justice and oppression. "You think you're untouchable, Ms. Crockett?" Judge Stevens sneered, trying to regain control over the room. "This is a court of law, not a stage for your personal agenda." Jasmine didn't flinch. "You're wrong, Judge," she responded coolly. "This is not about me. This is about what this courtroom represents, the system that has failed so many of us. If you think this is just a stage, then perhaps you need to understand the gravity of the moment. This is bigger than you or me." The judge's fury boiled over, but he knew better than to escalate further in front of the cameras. Instead, he resorted to his final weapon, a motion to hold Jasmine in contempt of court. The courtroom fell silent, waiting for the next move. Would this be the end of her defiance, or was she truly willing to face whatever consequences came next? But before he could complete the motion, Jasmine turned back to her live stream, speaking directly to her followers. "Look at what this judge is trying to do. He's trying to silence me with threats, with fines, with power. But I won't back down. You can't be silenced if you have the courage to speak up. You can't be broken if you refuse to bend." The comments section was now flooded with a wave of support. "We stand with you, Jasmine," one comment read. "Don't let them silence the truth," another echoed. The virtual arena had become an extension of the courtroom, and Jasmine had found a voice far more powerful than any fine could ever mute. Judge Stevens, realizing that the tides had turned, barked an order at his bailiff. "Take her into custody. She's in contempt." But before the bailiff could approach, Jasmine's lawyer, who had remained mostly silent up until now, stood up sharply. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my client is not in contempt of court. She has exercised her right to free speech. Any attempt to detain her would not only be illegal, but it would only strengthen the very movement she represents." The lawyer's words were like a sharp slap to the judge's authority. The courtroom fell into even deeper silence, as though the very air was holding its breath. For the first time, the judge seemed unsure of how to proceed. Jasmine turned her phone toward the courtroom, capturing the moment. "This is the real story," she said. "This is the moment when the law stops protecting people like me. This is the moment when they try to crush us. But I won't let them." The room, still frozen, seemed to collectively exhale. Judge Stevens, now realizing that his earlier tactic had backfired, struggled to maintain control. He hadn't anticipated the sheer force of Jasmine's presence, her ability to turn the tide in her favor with one simple act of defiance. The eyes of many, Jasmine was no longer just an individual facing a fine. She had become a symbol of resistance. A legal battle was no longer just a courtroom exchange, but a media event, an ideological war. The question on everyone's mind was no longer, what will happen to her, but what comes next? The judge, now visibly shaken, motioned for a recess. It was clear he needed time to regain control over the situation, to reevaluate his options and rethink his next steps. As the room slowly emptied, reporters scrambled for interviews, capturing the raw energy of the moment. Jasmine Crockett's name was on the lips of everyone in the press room, her defiance reverberating across the country. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained in the courtroom, standing resolute. Her lawyer, a quiet figure until now, leaned in close, offering her a quick but strategic reminder. "This isn't just about the fine anymore. It's about your message. This is the moment to take the narrative back." Jasmine nodded, understanding that the stakes had risen far beyond a simple fine. The system that had sought to silence her had just unwittingly made her a rallying point for the very people it had long overlooked. She wasn't just defending herself now, she was defending a cause, a movement, and she was fully aware of the power she now wielded. Minutes later, the judge returned to the bench, his face still flushed with frustration. He had considered his options, weighed the consequences, and come to a decision that would either force Jasmine to submit or escalate the confrontation to unprecedented heights. He cleared his throat, trying to restore order. "Ms. Crockett," the judge began, his voice lacking its earlier certainty, "you are still in contempt of court. I will give you one last chance to pay the fine and end this matter without further legal action." Jasmine stood tall, her gaze never wavering. "I've already said I won't pay that fine," she responded firmly, her voice steady, her words carrying a sense of finality. "This is about something much bigger than $15,000. This is about the broken system that punishes those who speak out. You've lost your chance to intimidate me. The only thing you've done is made this louder." The judge's face darkened, but it was too late to backpedal now. The cameras continued to roll, the world watching, waiting to see how he would respond to this unexpected turn of events. The reality had set in for the judge. He couldn't just back away from this without further consequences. If he pursued the contempt charge now, it would only escalate the situation. If he didn't, it would be seen as a sign of weakness. "Very well," he said, his voice low and strained. "But know this, your actions today have consequences. You may not face them immediately, but they will come." Jasmine smiled, knowing she had won. "Let them come," she replied. "Let them all come." It was in that moment when the judge hesitated that Jasmine realized she had truly turned the tables. What began as a courtroom conflict had morphed into a public spectacle, and the power to shape that spectacle was now in her hands. The tide had shifted, and she had navigated it with calculated precision. As the proceedings continued, Jasmine remained unshaken, her focus now entirely on the larger picture. She knew the true battle wasn't in the courtroom, it was in the court of public opinion. And with every word she spoke, with every action she took, she was winning. Her followers were growing by the minute, and the weight of the fine was now nothing compared to the strength of her message. Outside the courtroom, her supporters were rallying, some carrying signs, others simply standing in solidarity. The social media storm she had stirred was now a full-blown movement, and the voices of those who had once been silent were finally being heard. Jasmine Crockett had become more than just a figure in the courtroom. She had become a voice for the voiceless. As the judge pondered his next move, Jasmine had already begun to move on to her next victory. She had defied the system, but in doing so, she had shifted the balance of power in her favor. Her comeback had been more than just an act of defiance. It had been a masterstroke of strategy. The courtroom had emptied, but the battle was far from over. Outside, a crowd had gathered, a mixture of curious onlookers, reporters, and passionate supporters who had come to witness the aftermath of Jasmine Crockett's unforgettable stand. The air was thick with anticipation, and in the distance, the sound of cameras clicking, reporters shouting questions, and cheers from her followers reverberated through the streets. Jasmine had left the courtroom a victor in the eyes of many, but it wasn't the empty legal victory that mattered. What had happened in that courtroom wasn't just about a judge, a fine, or even her own words. It was about the broader implications of what had taken place. She had stood firm against authority, and in doing so, she had sparked something much larger than herself. Her lawyer, who had remained by her side throughout the ordeal, turned to her with a look of pride. "You did it, Jasmine," he said. "They tried to break you, and you broke them instead." She smiled, her eyes scanning the growing crowd of supporters. "This wasn't about me. It was never about me," she replied, her voice soft but resolute. "This is for everyone who has ever been silenced by fear, by power, by a system that doesn't care." As the news outlets continued to report the details of the courtroom clash, it became clear that Jasmine's defiance was the spark that ignited a wider conversation about justice, free speech, and the balance of power between individuals and authority. Political pundits and legal experts weighed in, some claiming Jasmine was a hero, others dismissing her actions as reckless. But no one could deny that her name had become synonymous with standing up against oppression, and that her fight was far from over. Within hours, Jasmine's live stream from the courtroom had gone viral, shared across social media platforms, news channels, and blogs. Clips of her unyielding words, her refusal to back down, and the judge's futile attempts to silence her were replayed over and over again, each view adding to the momentum of her movement. But it wasn't just the viral video that had changed the tide. It was the message. "I will not be silenced," Jasmine had declared in that pivotal moment. Those words echoed far beyond the courtroom, resonating with individuals who had long felt powerless in the face of authority. Her followers grew in numbers, organizing rallies, writing petitions, and flooding social media with the hashtag #CrockettResists. What had begun as a simple legal battle had now become a symbol of resistance, and Jasmine had emerged as its leader. Even Judge Stevens, in his later interviews, seemed to have a newfound respect for Jasmine, though he still disagreed with her methods. "I may not agree with her actions," he admitted, "but I can't deny that she's forced us all to look at the system in a new way." For Jasmine, however, there was no room for complacency. "This is just the beginning," she told reporters during an impromptu press conference. This courtroom battle, It's just a small part of the larger fight. We have a broken system, and I'm not the only one who's going to stand up to it. And stand up she did. As the weeks went on, Jasmine Crockett's influence only continued to grow. She was invited to speak at rallies, at universities, and on news programs. People who had once dismissed her as just another politician now saw her as a beacon of change. Her message was clear. It wasn't enough to resist once. You had to resist every single time the system tried to crush you. In the end, the $15,000 fine was never paid. Instead, Jasmine's fight had led to something much bigger: legislative changes, new legal precedents, and a public that no longer took the power of authority for granted. The conversation about the abuse of power and the need for reform was no longer a fringe debate. It was at the heart of national discourse. Jasmine Crockett had turned the tables, and in doing so, she had rewritten the rules of the game. Her instant comeback in the courtroom had stunned the world, but it was her continued fight for justice that would be her true legacy.